LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga Any% has a rich history, with its world record going down by almost an hour and a half across 78 distinct records over the past 7 years. These runs range from the early playthroughs that trailblaze the game to the most recent runs that leave little room for error, from runs that took minutes off of the record at a time to those that shaved off only a second. Among all of these achievements, one world record stands above the rest as the most impressive LEGO Star Wars speedrun ever completed, one that pushed the game far past the boundaries of its time and revolutionized the way players approached it. This is the story of that run, E-Roadhouse's 2:31:49. Let's set the scene. On July 22, 2020, veteran TCS speedrunner WeSuper became the first to complete the game in under 2 hours and 40 minutes. The race to sub 240 had been a close one, with each of the top 3 runners achieving runs that barely fell short of being the first one to break the 10-minute barrier in the weeks leading up. But during the same time, another runner just outside the top 3 had been rapidly improving. E-Roadhouse first started running the game in spring 2020 as a joke, but quickly began chunking down his time throughout the summer as he became more and more serious about the hobby. In August, he became the second person to break the sub 240 barrier, jumping up 4 spaces on the leaderboard with a new world record of 2:39:43.
Oh my god! Oh my gosh, dude.
WeSuper returned over the following few months, armed with 2 new skips found over the summer, and got a pair of world records to lower the fastest completion of the game down to 2:36:08 on October 11th, before taking an extended break to focus on other projects. However, only 2 weeks after this record was set, a new 75-second time save was found. Using this new skip and matching the execution of WeSuper's latest run, E-Roadhouse attained his second world record at 2:34:51. At this point, he had his sights set on achieving a 2:33, a run which would leave him satisfied with the category's level of optimization. He spent the next 2 months trying to achieve this, but struggled to see major improvement, lowering his time by only 19 seconds after another 100 attempts. To help ease the frustration, on the evening of December 17, 2020, he decided to do a race for fun with fellow runner EJP Man. What followed was one of the craziest and most unexpected runs of the game ever performed.
What just happened? Dude, I've never seen you play that well before.
No one's seen anybody play that.
Yeah, actually, that's
Look,
actually like
look at
really
the time.
insane.
Just stare at the final
Okay.
time.
Let's dive into the details to see how this run came to be.
3, 2, 1.
Alright, I think I'm gonna win this one.
At the time of this run, the biggest early game obstacle was pod fraud, a newly found very difficult trick in the 4th level of the run. Making a mistake while performing the skip resulted in over a minute of time loss and forced a reset. As a result, the expectations of the 3 levels before it were slightly lower than they had been before the trick's discovery, just to increase the number of runs that made it to Mos Espa pod race. E-Roadhouse played the first 3 levels without much issue, having a slight time loss with a second try jump over the barrier in negotiations, making up for it with a very fast tree climb in Invasion of Naboo and a textbook escape from Naboo to enter pod race only 6 seconds off his sum of bests. As I alluded to, pod race was a difficult level at the time, requiring a precise high-speed maneuver to hit the second lap trigger with one player while remaining out of bounds with the other to still execute the pod fraud lap skip. If you don't know much about this skip, I broke it down in detail in one of my older videos, which you can check out for yourself linked below. Having successfully executed pod fraud, he cleared pod race and continued on. Retake Theed Palace and Darth Maul are the first major execution test levels of the run, featuring a number of skips and complicated 1P2Cs that require practice and honed skills to consistently perform well at a high level. E-Roadhouse cruised through Theed with no mishaps, and got a clean first try DM1 in the beginning of Maul before getting both of the double frame perfect cycle skips in the end fight of the level. This episode 1 was pretty solid, avoiding any serious mistakes and coming out just 10 seconds slower than the fastest episode 1 ever executed at the time. He sat only 20 seconds off of his sum of bests and was ready to continue a decent early game into episode 2. The first half of episode 2 is mostly a test of execution, featuring 3 levels with a lot of 1P2C and not too many skips. Levels like these tend to be what separate the good players from the best. Those with the best average play tend to save seconds over those with slightly worse gameplay, and being able to capitalize on tests of execution and eke out those few extra seconds consistently allows good players to push ahead of the rest. Roadhouse cruised through these 3 levels, scoring a droid factory that was only a fraction of a second off of his gold, and the only noteworthy mistake here being a second try R4 fly on Discovery on Camino. Then came Jedi Battle, the first RNG heavy level of the run. The first half of the level heavily tests execution from killing the droids surrounding the 3 pillars, before 2 waves of hide and seek where the player has to locate the randomly spawned in security and super battle droids. Roadhouse's pillars were pretty clean, but he lost a little bit of time to some mediocre RNG in the 2 waves, finishing up the level 13 seconds off of his goal, which is a pretty standard split for the time. He finished up the episode with a no mistakes gunship cavalry, and a successful Dooku skip. Although there was a bit of time lost between Camino and Jedi Battle, the rest of the episode was clean enough to secure a 6-second best split time out of episode 2, a comfortable pace as he transitioned into the mid-game. At this point, he was 48 seconds off of his sum of bests, with a best possible time of 2:30.28, which is more than good enough pace to be on when aiming for a 2:33. After purchasing exploding blaster bolts and entering secret plans, Roadhouse began the first original trilogy episode of the run. The OT episodes are usually considered to be harder than the prequels, with more skips, tests of execution, and opportunities for time loss. Episode 4 starts off with a fairly consistent level, and Roadhouse flew through secret plans without any issue before starting through the Junlin Wastes. Junlin is one of the more broken levels in the game, featuring skips in most rooms of the level. With a quick red brick grab and clean sandcrawler, he entered the second to last room of the level on a pretty good Junland. Unfortunately, he took a costly death on the first quicksand jump, and another on the second, and then had some issues getting speeder clip in the final room, which resulted in a split that was 27 seconds off of his gold segment. While this is not ideal, since Roadhouse's average level of play is pretty high, and he has been playing well throughout the run so far, he could afford to have a bad split here or there and maintain pace with his goal. Knowing this, he shook off the time loss and kept his focus on the run ahead. Continuing into Mos Eisley Spaceport, he got a fast first try on Oil Glitch and powered through the next few rooms without issue, landing a quick no-deactivate spy fight skip without problem. In Rescue the Princess, he landed the Autobound's first try, and despite a slow appearance from Obi-Wan, he still finished the split with a good time off the back of his clean execution. Into Death Star Escape, Roadhouse faced off against the newest large skip in the game, Falconless. With this skip, he was able to bypass the lengthy end room of the level, which routes out over a minute of execution-heavy gameplay and some inconsistent enemy combat. The only major time loss that can happen on this level comes from losing the Stormtrooper helmet, but Roadhouse made it through all of the Imperial panels without incident and finished only a few seconds off of gold. The final level of the episode, Rebel Attack, is relatively straightforward, and he played through with almost no issue, taking only a minor time loss to a pair of deaths. At the halfway point of the run, Roadhouse sat at +3 to his best exits, with the time loss of Junland offset by the rest of episode 4 being close to his golds. Keeping close to best exits was all he really wanted to see out of these 3 episodes. His 2:31.09 best possible time at this point was 129 off of his sum of bests, so if he could replicate that in the second half of the run, he would finish with a 2:32.38. However, since the back half of the run is where a lot of the troublesome splits reside, it's harder to play this close to bests in episodes 6, 3, and 5. In either case, he had plenty of room to still hit his goal of 2:33, even if the second half of the run didn't go as well. After buying Fast Force, Roadhouse began episode 6 with Jabba's Palace, cruising through the first half of the level before approaching Spiderless. He clipped out first try with a fast setup and executed the Autobounds after it and the Rancor boss fight cleanly, resulting in his first gold segment of the run. This would turn out to also be a community gold, the best segment anyone that ran the game has ever achieved on that level during a run. With a good start to the episode, he continued into what is debatably the worst level in the entire speedrun, the Great Pit of Carcoon. This level features a lot of enemy variants in its first and last rooms, and Disco Skip, one of the least consistent tricks in the game at the time, which many well-paced runs have been killed to. Roadhouse made it through room 1 with only a single death towards the end, which was about as good as you could hope for with that room. He managed a first try Disco Skip, and even though he got unlucky with a despawned power-up in the end room, he still managed to play only 5 seconds off of his gold, a feat anyone would be happy with on Carcoon. He cruised through Speeder Showdown, getting a quick first try Speeder Skip and playing close to gold, then entered Battle of Endor, probably the most execution-heavy level in the game. He played the level very well, avoiding any real errors and finishing only 3 seconds off of his gold. He got Ultra Kill in the next level on his first try, albeit with some issues pushing Palpatine towards the end of the trick, and then headed into the final level of the episode, into the Death Star. This level features an RNG-heavy first room that even top-level runners can easily lose 20 seconds to. Roadhouse got a solid first room, only 10 seconds off of the best ever done, and played through the entire rest of the level cleanly without dying or blanking a single torpedo. This resulted in another gold segment, beating his previous best by 11 seconds, and also beating the community gold, one that had stood for almost 5 months. This episode 6 was the fastest ever performed in a full game run at the time, sitting at only 14 seconds off of Roadhouse's episode Sum of Bests, and only 1 second slower than what his Sum of Bests was when he started the episode in that run. At this point, he was now a minute 45 ahead of the world record and his best exits, and with a 2:31.21 best possible time, he did not even need a good end to the run to shatter his goal of 2:33. In fact, 2:32 was very possible at this point, as long as there was no disasters in the last 2 episodes, and there was even an outside chance of a 2:31 happening. But that was a bit far-fetched, since playing within 39 seconds of Sum of Bests in the last 2 episodes is pretty difficult to do. On to episode 3. After sailing through the autoscroller Battle over Coruscant, he had a pretty decent opening to Chancellor in Peril, minimizing time loss to enemy variants in the first 4 rooms, and then landing all 3 cycle skips in the boss fight to finish out the level. In General Grievous, he faced off against the 3rd RNG heavy level of the run, but managed a pretty decent quick kill, dealing 9 hearts of damage in 4 cycles before finishing the boss off with a lightsaber slash. He followed that up with a very well executed defense of Kashyyyk, before heading into Ruin of the Jedi, where he played flawlessly and beat yet another community gold, the longest standing community gold in the game at the time, which hadn't been beaten in over 10 months. He rounded out the episode with a couple of hiccups in Darth Vader, which ended up being a weak split, but not enough to derail the momentum of the run or his focus. Episode 3 was pretty solid, particularly in Kashyyyk and especially Ruin, which helped balance out the time loss on a few of the other splits. He lost 11 seconds to his pace in this episode, but was still sitting at a minute 34 ahead of the world record. His best possible time was still under 2:32, which gave him a comfortable cushion in the last episode to walk in a satisfying PB. A 2:31, however, looked to be out of the cards, given that he had only 23 seconds of leeway to beat that minute barrier, and episode 5 features 2 RNG heavy levels, as well as the hardest level in the game. Starting out with Hoth Battle, he played the opening well before heading into the arena at the end of the level. His first 2 waves had very good RNG, and after finishing out a decent last 2 waves, he exited the level only 1 second off of his gold. Next was Escape from Echo Base, a consistent level that Roadhouse had mastered during his grind. Although there were a few small errors throughout the level, he finished only 5 seconds away from his gold, certainly good enough to maintain the pace. Falcon Flight was up next. Out of all the RNG levels in the game, this one is the most out of the player's control, since the highly variable boulder encounter at the end of the level can make or break paces when a run gets there. Given that Roadhouse was a minute 54 ahead here, it was nearly impossible for even a disastrous boulder to ruin the pace. But given that his best possible time at this point was still sub 2:31, a really good boulder could make a 2:31 a reality, however small. He ended up losing around 15 seconds to a really good Falcon Flight, and although he actually saved 5 seconds to his personal best, his best possible time was now sitting at a 2:31.56, making 2:31 pretty much impossible given that 3 levels remained in the run. Undeterred, he continued into Dagobah, getting past Hut Skip without issue and finishing out the level 2 seconds off gold. At this point, Roadhouse entered the penultimate level of the speedrun, Cloud City Trap, considered the hardest level in the run. Given the infeasibility of a 2:31 at this point, there was not much pressure to perform perfectly on this level to clutch a minute barrier, but since he was really happy with the pace of the run, he decided to deafen the voice call he was in to maximize his focus. As he entered the second room of the level, he got this very lucky deflect to destroy the barrier early. Normally you would walk over to the barrier and then deflect, but this rare variant saves a few seconds over the normal result. Right after, he attempted the first major skip of the level, Panel Fly, and landed it first try. In the next room, he got the gap jump and panel jump first try as well, continuing into the second Darth Vader boss fight. Although this room didn't have a skip at the time, it was still one of the hardest boss fights in the game to do optimally. Roadhouse executed the room perfectly, then continued into the third boss fight. This room features the most precise jump in the run, a jump that has only 3 frames of leeway split between the 2 jump inputs. Roadhouse quickly lined up for his attempt, and nailed this trick first try as well, an almost perfect Cloud City Trap up to this point. He got the jumps in the last room first and second try respectively before finishing the final boss fight. As the level ends, Roadhouse said it best.
I'm so good!
This ended up being an 11-second gold and a 6-second community gold, and on such a difficult late-game level, golds like this were not a common thing. With Cloud City Trap out of the way and the new gold under his belt, he was now sitting at a 2:31.48 best possible time, making it now totally feasible for him to snag the 2:31. With just Betrayal over Bespin left, he had a chance to close out the best episode 5 ever achieved in a run if he got a solid last split. The level features only a few points that could potentially cause disaster, and he was able to get by the first one, Door Clip, without issue. Into the second half of the level, he continued to play cleanly, also clearing Box Clip without issue, and entering the last room of the speedrun pacing his gold. (2:31.49), a new world record by 2 minutes and 43 seconds, the largest drop in a world record time in one run since Zolas's 3:17 nearly 3 years prior. Roadhouse had shattered his goal for the category, leaving fellow top runners in awe that a 2:31 run had already happened, heralding it as the best executed speedrun the game had ever seen. So where does a game go after having its best run ever? It is the nature of all competitive speedrun world records to continue lowering over time, and what was once a good time never remains that way for long. Roadhouse's new world record was not so noteworthy because he got a time that no one thought would ever happen, but rather because he got the time much earlier than anyone could have thought it would have been achieved. It was quite literally a run ahead of its time. But eventually, with a combination of more competition, new strats, and a constant increase in the average level of play, the time that would be considered a good run would continue to lower further and further. But regardless of how many minute barriers have been broken in the time since, the 2:31.49 is still to this day considered the best executed world record the game has ever seen, and that is a legacy few runs are able to come close to. But who knows? Maybe in the next few years we'll see another run that is just as ahead of its time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share, and if you are interested in others like it related to LEGO speedrunning, feel free to subscribe and check out the other videos I've made. The TCS Any% world record continues to be lowered, with the top runners frequently doing attempts live on Twitch. If you are interested in keeping up with their progress, links to their streams can be found down below. Until next time, I hope you have an excellent day.